Hi, everyone, and welcome and thank you for joining us today for the Behind the Attraction virtual press junket. I'm Jeffrey Epstein, co-host of the D23 Inside Disney podcast, and I'm so happy to be here to talk about Behind the Attraction. Streaming on Disney Plus beginning July 21st, the 10-part original series is a fun, enchanting show that gives viewers an exclusive peek behind the curtain of the most beloved attractions and destinations at Disney theme parks and resorts around the world. Now, to tell you more about this series and attractions, we have special guests, executive producer and director Brian Volk-Weiss, and an incredible quartet of Disney Imagineers, Jeanette Lomboy, Mark Levine, Vanessa Hunt, and Dave Durham. So let's get to it. Everyone ready? Hey, everyone. All right, so Brian, I'd like to start with a few questions for you. Can you give us the one-sentence pitch that you feel best describes the show?
That's tough. I'm from New York. It's very hard to talk in one sentence. But
we have half an hour, Brian. Come on, we got to get through a lot of questions.
All right. I didn't know we were speed dating. I'm ready. Okay, it's a fun show that first and foremost is designed to entertain, but hopefully when it's over, and not to use a dirty word with that starts with an L, but you might have learned something. But first and foremost, it's supposed to be entertaining and fun.
Awesome. Excellent. And a good one sentence.
And thank you for not calling me on 3 sentences.
The Imagineering story was immensely popular on Disney Plus. Can you talk about how this series is different and how the idea for it came about?
Well, the idea, I'll go in reverse order. The idea came about, we had partnered up with Dwayne Johnson's company, $7, and we were working on a show that we had pitched to Disney Plus. And Disney Plus, they liked the show. I would say they didn't love the show. And you know, a company doesn't love a show when they don't buy a show. But they said, hey, what about doing a similar show to what you pitched, but have it be about the attractions? And I said, I'd love to do a show about the rides. And they said, don't ever say that word again. It's called attractions. And I said, my bad. And that's basically how it came about. We were given a lot of great notes, which I frantically scribbled down. Our development team put together a brand new deck, which is like a proposal for a TV show. And we brought it back, and every day working on this show, with no exaggeration, 5 to 1,000 times a day, I would say to myself, I cannot believe this show was greenlit, but it was greenlit. I promise you it was greenlit. So that's how it came together. And I would say one of the major differences between the two shows is, and it's very hard. I think that show is phenomenal. I think it's an A+ show. So what we tried to do is we tried to really get into the fun. We went away a little bit from the history and the protocols of building these attractions and just really went for these fun nuggets that either helped build the pop culture that we live in now or a part of what's coming that is allowing Disney to continue to help have such a big voice in the culture. So that's what we tried to do.
You mentioned the fun nuggets. What is the most interesting nugget that you learned about an attraction?
That is so hard to answer, and I'm sorry, Dave. You're gonna hear a lot of your stories said back to you. But when the show is like, here's how I would put it. When the show was greenlit, I thought I had like a master's degree on the way to a PhD in Disney. I have been obsessed with Disney since I was like 5 or 6. Like, I've read a billion books about it. I learned very quickly that I may have had a 5th or 6th grade education in Disney. So Disney Plus very graciously kind of began training us on the stuff that Disney's doing that is not public, which of course we had never had access to. So it was actually in a meeting with Dave, our first meeting with Dave, where I had asked a bunch of questions and Dave had answered them, but Dave could tell from the questions I was asking, I didn't understand his answers. So Dave goes, all right, let me put it this way. Have you ever done the Finding Nemo ride? And I go, yes, I have. I love it. I told a story I'm not going to tell here about my 3-year-old at the time, but needless to say, Dave goes, all right, here's how it goes. So when you're looking through the porthole, you're seeing those beautiful fish, but that's a projector. And I knew that. I'm like, I know that, Dave. Everybody knows that. I read that the day the ride opened, the attraction opened. And he's like, here's what you don't know. When that attraction's being built, they're moving cables and wires and plumbing all throughout that area for attractions that will not be built possibly for 15 to 20 years. And that's what, like, that was the moment where I'm like, got it. Okay, that's how I have to look at this show. That's how I have to look at the parks. And that for me was the beginning of, I would say, heading towards, I still don't think I ever had, and I sure even now don't have a master's in Disney, but that was the beginning of me being like, all right, I'm still in high school. I got to keep studying. But that was the moment where I started to understand everything better than I ever had.
I'd love to know, I'd love to have each of the Imagineers introduce yourselves. And can you each let us know a few of the attractions or projects that you've worked on? And I will start with the person who on my screen is next to me, Jeanette.
Hi, everyone. I am Jeanette Lomboy. I get the pleasure of overseeing everything at the Disneyland Resort on Aulani. So most recently, we obviously just opened Avengers Campus, but long list of things. Aulani probably is my baby from 10 years ago. We're coming up on the 10th anniversary. Have also worked on Pandora, in Animal Kingdom, all kinds of projects that go back. And I started as a storybook Fantasyland girl in 1995. So long history with the company. And I was the little girl who wanted to be an Imagineer and was inspired by all the stories I heard when I was a kid. So happy to be here and be part of the show.
Wow. Jeanette, I want to now go on the storybook canal boats with you now. I want to hear your spiel on that.
I'm happy to take you around. I still know it.
Mark, up next.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you, Jeffrey. So I'm Mark Levine. I lead the story development team at Imagineering. After a career in television doing writing, I've been working at Imagineering. Numerous projects around the world, from cruise ships to Pandora, like Jeanette. Spent 5 years working on that project. And working a lot with people like Brian on our park stories and things we can do with them. Story development is involved in everything we do at Disney. So have a lot of work.
We're going to go to Dave.
Hello, my name is Dave Durham. I work in the ride studio. I work primarily in blue sky, front end concepting for new attractions. I've had the good fortune to work in creative, in production, in R&D, and the ride studio. So lots of rides I've had the pleasure to work on, from Indiana Jones to Star Tours and back again. So lots of great memories.
Two of my favorites, and Indy looks really fantastic right now since the park reopened. So kudos to you and Jeanette. And last but certainly not least, Vanessa.
Hi, I'm Vanessa. I am part of the Walt Disney Imagineering Art Collection team. We are the archive responsible for documenting and caring for all the artwork created by Imagineering for our projects around the world. I'm also a part-time author for Disney Publishing.
Has written several incredible books that I own on my shelf. I should add. So I want to ask each of you. You've all worked on incredible projects, and all have worked on attractions, with the exception of Vanessa, but this still applies to you. I'd like to know if you could have worked on an attraction that you weren't able to work on, either because it wasn't in existence when you were working at Disney, or just you were working on another project, what would that be? And again, Jeanette, you're right next to me, so you're up first.
I'm going to say It's a Small World. I have to say, when I was a little girl, one of the things that I really loved was, I remember coming through and seeing, I'm Filipino, and seeing a Filipino doll. And I was like, you're speaking to me. And, Mary Blair is a legend in my book and has Oh gosh, we all look up to her. I love her sense, her color sense, and how she was such a female and dominant, strong presence. So I will say without a doubt, Small World, I still look at it for reference, graphically speaking, color-wise, and it is such an anchor to Disneyland. So I'd love to work on It's a Small World.
I agree with Jeanette completely. I was going to say the same thing. Just to have the opportunity to be able to work with Mary Blair and Rolly Crump and Mark Davis and all the amazing Imagineers who worked on that would be such an incredible learning experience. And just, I want to talk to them about creating that. I want to talk to Mary about all of her artwork you see behind me.
Good. All right. So we've got two Small Worlds. Dave, thoughts?
I'm going a different direction. I'm going to go with Space Mountain, Florida, the original Space Mountain. Such an iconic shape, such a cool idea to put, a roller coaster, let alone two roller coasters, inside a building, and then use it as a show space with stars and effects. And that to me was just a really clever way to do an interesting, coaster. And I remember as a kid, seeing, following in my Disney News magazine and watching the pictures and the artwork as was being developed and going down there after it opened and getting a chance to ride it and just, and thinking, yep, pays off. It's as great as I thought it would be. And then for us to make, more and different ones later, fantastic.
Mark.
This is such a hard question. It's hard because it's between, for me, Pirates and the Haunted Mansion. So I'm going to go with the Haunted Mansion. You got Claude Coates, Mark Davis. Walt had the idea, but he didn't live to see it through. It is so packed with storytelling, so many details. You can ride it over and over again. I still ride it. I've been on it probably 50 times and still see things every time. So to me, Haunted Mansion has to be at the top of my list for sure.
Brian, can you talk a little bit about working with Dwayne on this and what his involvement was?
It's such a cliche, but I mean, his involvement was awesome, for lack of a better word. You probably want some specifics and not just some vague word. I mean, anything we asked of him, to make a phone call, to shoot a text, anything we needed from him, he was there immediate. Like he was getting stuff done faster than, like, let's say if one of his colleagues had asked me to do it, and he was like, I think he made 89 movies while we were making the show. So he was like always there for us in that regard. But the other thing that was great about Dwayne was, and it's so funny working with celebrities, there's what you see and then there's what you get. And I don't think I'm ruining, I'm not saying Santa Claus doesn't exist, but that gap is usually medium to very wide. With Dwayne, whatever you see him doing on television, like when you see him interviewed, anything like that, that's him. And he brings an enthusiasm and an energy to every conference call, every Zoom, every meeting. Everything we did with him was high energy. We were laughing. And like the first time I met him, he's in a very obscure Voyager episode of Star Trek. And I brought that up to him the first time I met him. He remembers. Like the next time I saw him, he brought it up. And I'm like, I don't remember my kids' names half the time. How do you remember something I said to you 19 months ago that was so obscure? So that's him. And I would say he loves Disney as much as anybody on this press conference. Like he gets it. He's into it. He's been going to it forever. And it was, I mean, again, to call it awesome and a joy, tremendous understatement, actually.
Yeah. Well, and Vanessa, I understand you were involved when Dwayne toured the Imagineering art collection. What was that like?
Yeah, he visited us a couple of times while he was working on Jungle Cruise. He really just wanted to learn. He wanted to see the artwork and learn about the Imagineers who brought Jungle Cruise to life. So we pulled some of the original artwork out for him to see, and he just got to sort of stand and stare at it and really soak it all in. And we talked about the Imagineers who created the artwork, and he was asking questions, and he was very excited to be there. On his second trip back, he turned to my coworker Mike and was like, "Do we get to go in the vault again?" He was really like a little kid, super excited about that.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Brian and anyone else who was maybe involved in the creative process, how did you land on what attractions and destinations and pieces were included?
So we started with a list that I exaggerate not, was like, it would have been over 100. But I think Mark was like, yeah, you might want to trim that down a bit. So I think we still submitted a list of 30. The good news to get it down fast was we decided very early on not to do any episodes about attractions that don't exist anymore. So otherwise it would have been 10 episodes about Mission to Mars. So that was shot down very aggressively. So my feelings were hurt a little, but I got it. Once we made that decision, what we tried to do was blend. It was like a blending of the iconic attractions where, like, if we didn't do a small world, people would be like, what are you talking? How could you not do a small world? But then we also tried to do episodes where it's like, you may have expected this, knock on wood, God willing, to have come up in season 8. Why are you doing it in season 1? And there was a very deliberate reason, because there are a lot of attractions. And by the way, going back to your other question, like about what I learned, I always say this was my takeaway from making the show. Attractions are like icebergs. And what I mean by that is, to the public, you're only seeing maybe 2% of the attraction. If people knew the infrastructure that they don't see that make these attractions work, I mean, they'd be blown away. So that was a big part of what we were trying to do, was take something like, like we have an episode, it's called Trains, Trams, and Monorails. That might not be a no-brainer for season 1, but hopefully, God willing, when people see it, they're going to be like, oh my God, I had no idea. So instead of always racing to their favorite attraction that they do every time they go to the park for the first time in 6 to 12 months, somebody's going to say to their parents, I want to go to the monorail. Why do you want to go to the monorail? Did you see the show? So it was a blending of that.
Jeanette, Mark, Dave, a lot of times Imagineers are behind the scenes people. For this, you really come out in front of the camera. Can you talk about what that experience was like for you, and sharing things that are often, kept under lock and key?
Well, I'll start. I'll say, what Brian was mentioning is true. I mean, we are tasked to do impossible things, fun things, magical things. And if we're trying to bring those stories to life, you can bet that there's a lot of stories about bringing it to life that guests never hear. And they just see the end product of that. So to talk about it, like to be asked questions that we're not typically asked about, like, why did you do it this way? And what did you really mean by that? And were there challenges, and was it fun? I mean, it really was great for us to kind of mine through the process of what we go through together to make these things come to life. And I think I learned a lot too in the process. I mean, I was asked a question about whether or not Jungle Cruise, the initial feeling for Jungle Cruise and what Walt wanted out of that, which was a true life adventure, whether that actually seeded Animal Kingdom. And the truth is, Animal Kingdom is a fulfillment of Walt's vision of Jungle Cruise. He wanted to deliver guests into Africa with animals. And that's what we did years and decades later. So that connective tissue runs strong, and we don't get to talk about that enough. We just get to show our guests what the end product looks like. So it was a lot of fun to talk about. And there were so many other stories that we haven't even been able to share yet.
And I'll just jump in and say, what was so interesting to me working on this, working, with Brian and the team, and seeing it all come together, and then watching all those episodes and final sort of edit. The through line to me has been the through line that goes all the way back to Walt. That, again, this sort of drive for pushing to do things we've never done before, to go further, and the big teams that do it. Those of us who are Imagineers today, there's a direct lineage to those Imagineers that first started this work. And you see that in the show, which I think is just a wonderful through line, that you just sort of see this connection of almost 70 years of people doing this kind of work. So to me, it's been exciting to be part of it. It's exciting to be part of it now, and exciting to see the lineage of what Imagineering and everyone involved in park creations have done.
There are so many stories behind all of our attractions, and we never get to tell them. And there'll be times when I'll be in the park as a guest and I'll be standing in a line and some other guests will be talking about, oh, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, no, you have no idea. Oh, what do you can say something? Oh, can't say anything. Yep. Bite your tongue, bite your tongue. This is a chance where we don't have to bite our tongue. We get to share with the viewer some of those cool inside stories, some of the history, some of the challenges, and a lot of the fun. It really is fun to build this stuff. It's a lot of work. It's a whole lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. And those stories, you don't get to share. So you get to see, as was said, tip of the iceberg. Now you get to go a few feet underwater and see more of it.
Something, and Jeanette, I think you and I talked about this a while ago, that I know Imagineers love to do is on the opening day, be there to see guests actually ride the attraction for the first time and see their reactions, either from an experience like that or just a story you've heard. Is there a comment that a guest gave you that really moved you in a way that potentially surprised you after experiencing an attraction that you worked on?
Yeah, I'll say, the very first attraction I worked on, which is not in this show, but it was really insignificant in terms of scope and scale, which was for Millennium at Epcot. I remember walking through, and we know why we do what we do. And by the way, we're not just about big attractions. We have decompression spaces. We have small attractions. We have all kinds of things that make the Disney guest experience in the parks. And I remember walking into that space and seeing 3 generations of women, a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter, and they were not speaking a language I understood. And I realized in that moment they were having fun, that what I could do in that moment, everything, all the pain, the angst that we go through to deliver these things to our guests, that they could understand it, even though we didn't speak the same language, we weren't from the same country, we had different viewpoints. And that not only that thing lives on now and is touching people in ways that are meaningful. And that surprised me. It surprised me that kind of love and passion that we put in, and trust me, there is a lot of pain, love, and passion that goes into what we make, really affects the guest experience in a way that I never understood, and that we could speak to the world all the time, even now. So it is surprising. It's surprising to me. And also at the same time, it just amazes me after all these years that it feels that same way every time we open something.
Dave or Mark?
Yeah, a ton. And literally, the coolest thing for me as Imagineer is to be able to go stand by the exit of a new attraction that we open, and you've put years, working with a team, so many hours, so many meetings, so many decisions, and you have the vision the whole time as to what you hope that thing will end up being, and then when all is said and done, the guest literally speaks as they come off the ride and you're listening. Did they like it? Were they happy? Did it meet the expectations? And what I watch for is, do they run right back around and get back in line again? And it's this thing where you don't have to say a word. Their actions say it for you. And you just sit back and you smile and you go, that was worth it. And so it's not always what you hear, it's what you see.
Can I say something though, because I'm the only one here who's not an Imagineer? There's something better than people complimenting an attraction when they get off it. And I was a part of that when I got off Ride of the Resistance. Speechless. Mm-hmm. Literally 6 people were just blinking. For adults. 5 of the 6 people were adults, just blinking. No one said a word for about 15 seconds. I don't know what's a better compliment than that.
Absolutely. Vanessa, you've written books, you research for, I know you work a lot with the Walt Disney Archives and D23, and your work is amazing. Was there something that you, with all of your years of researching, learned when working on the show?
So my involvement was mainly, I was interviewed and that was it. My other team members took point on working on the show, fulfilling the requests. However, in watching the show, it was really neat for me to hear the stories firsthand from my fellow Imagineers about these attractions that I had maybe heard bits and pieces of those stories before, or I had read about them, but to hear them from that person themselves was really kind of a neat experience for me.
So visiting the parks is it's all about in-person experiences. It's all about these very tactile, visual, interactive experiences. How do you convey that through story for the Imagineers and through story and the visuals when crafting the documentary?
I mean, what we tried to do, and this is one of my quote unquote secret sauce things or whatever, but like what I always try to do is start very small and tight with a detail. Like you might be watching it by design for 30 to 60 seconds and be like, you may even want to hit pause and be like, did I press play on the wrong show? But that's very deliberate, because what we're trying to do is start small. And once again, similar to Dave telling us that story about the pipes and wires being laid 3 decades before they're needed, like we try to treat the viewer like, just trust us, this is important. And over the course of the rest of the episode, the meaning of that original story, we add a little context here, a little context there. And by the end of the episode, if we've balanced everything correctly, and in theory, if we've done our jobs right, you don't even know this is happening until you would potentially watch the episode again. But we basically, those things you do when you're a kid, it's like connect the dots, where it starts off where it's a bunch of dots. And then at the end, after all the things, it's like, oh, it's a dragon. That's what we try to do. So we start small, and then we just connect the dots. And by the end of the episode, you're like, I get it. And then again, theorizing, we got it right, hopefully. When you go to the park and you see the building, it just hits you like you're Neo in the Matrix or something, where it's like, how did I know all this? Oh yeah, I watched Behind the Attraction. So that's what we tried to do.
And because we are running low on time, I'm going to get to another question for the Imagineers. Where do you start when developing a new attraction? And for some of the newer attractions, can you talk about tech that's maybe been developed outside of Disney that you've been able to adapt and utilize for new attractions?
So how we started an attraction, there's many ways into that, but and of course I'm biased. I have it in my title, story, but it is about storytelling. It is about how do we bring a world to life, be it a world that has come to us from the movies, where we want to find our way into that world, like we did with Pandora, Jeanette and I, and the team, to figure out how we were going to experience that kind of world, or a story we've created in ourselves. And again, go back to Haunted Mansion and Pirates. So I think it does start with storytelling. Of course, our storytelling is different. We're putting you as a guest in the middle of that story. You're a main character of the story, even if you see the favorite characters that you know from the movies. So that's the way we often start, is really what is our story approach into an attraction. It can also start with other ways in too. And that could be technology. I'll let Dave, probably Dave, you should probably speak to that one.
Technology is always a big deal. And often Mark and his team will come up with fantastic stories, and we're not sure what technology exists to tell that story. And sometimes we have to invent the technology. We have a great R&D group and fantastic blue sky Imagineers in numerous technical fields. And sometimes we'll partner with somebody on the outside who's already done some work in some interesting areas. And we also have Disney Research, a whole nother group. So technology is important, but technology is only there to support the telling of the story. If we do things right, you're not thinking about the technology. You're not thinking about all this often, invented, patented, no one else in the world has this technology. You're just, amazed in the story. And that's what we want. We're building, we're making places for you to have wonderful experiences and shared memories in the places that you're going to. Those who are the little techno geeks like me, someday, we'll write it 4 or 5 times to try to figure out how that effects works. But you may need to write it 4 or 5 times to figure out how that effects works, because it's done so well and woven so well into the story.
Jeanette, you want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, I'm going to say I thought of an example as we were sitting here and talking. One of the things I love is that for, say, Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, we went to a large elevator manufacturer and said, and elevator technology has existed for a long, long time. And we said, hey, we'd like to do something with your technology that you've never done before. And they basically said, well, we can do that, but that's opposite of what we would typically do for an elevator. So I think sometimes we use technology that exists in different ways, right, to bring light to life our attractions, and Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, which is now Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout at Disney California Adventure. That's one perfect example of how we think out of the box.
Yeah, the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror story is, I always love hearing about that. Brian, can you talk about the conversational style of the show? It's very fast-paced, very quippy in tone, and a little bit more self-deprecating than a lot of Inside Disney fare. Can you talk about how the tone was chosen, and how you were able to incorporate it for the various rides, and did it change when you were talking about different attractions?
So my personal background is comedy. I've been I would say the first half of my career was 99% comedy. So when your career starts off like that, and the bulk of it is like that, you hire the people you know. So we, as we've started moving slightly out of pure comedy, I'm still working with the editors and the showrunners and the story editors that I've worked with for a long time and I trust. So I guess to answer your second question first, Disney Plus chose our style because they know our style. So we have done some other shows that have this comedic yet informationally. Here's where it comes from, if I'm being honest. We did a show about 5 years ago called The Toys That Made Us that I have been trying to sell for 7 or 8 years. And I'm a huge doc lover, like going back to college where if you wanted to see a doc, you had to go to a movie theater. So one of the things I've always had a problem with is docs that are dealing with fun and happy and light subjects, but treat them like, it's the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. I've never understood that. So when we started to get the opportunity to make shows about what we consider to be fun topics, I was like, I'm not going to treat this like the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. We're making a show about toys. We're making a show now about amusement park attractions. So why wouldn't it be fun? And then to the self-deprecating of it all, that, I'm just being honest with you, that's a style that I like, and it's a style that I trust. And it could be because I grew up in New York, I don't know, but I find people or shows or things that take themselves too seriously don't get the respect that they should if they're just being honest and saying, listen, we're not gods. We haven't made a perfect amusement park. We changed amusement parks forever. If you look at what amusement parks were before Walt Disney did what he did in Anaheim, it's night and day. But it's a show about something made by humans being watched by humans. How can you not be self-deprecating? Of course you could be not. You don't have to be. But that's why we chose to do that.
Sure. So with time for one last question, I'm going to hit this with everyone, although I'm not sure if all the Imagineers have seen all the episodes, so there may be some guesswork involved here. But there's a lot of ground covered in the series of the 10 episodes, a lot of attractions crammed into each one. And when I say crammed, I mean in a loving, magical way. Can you each come up with one attraction to see included potentially in a future episode, should there be a season 2 of the show? Starting with Mark.
Flight of Passage. Avatar Flight of Passage. I'm biased. It's a good
Vanessa?
I'm going to go with Sinbad's Storybook Voyage, Tokyo Disney Sea.
Good one. Dave?
I'm going to go with Kilimanjaro Safaris at Animal Kingdom.
Jeanette?
I'm going to go classic. My favorite attraction of all time is Disneyland's Pirates of the Caribbean, but it is expressed differently. And our most recent Pirates of the Caribbean in Shanghai is such an amazing technological masterpiece, and really one of the finest rides in the world. So I would love to see that covered. And I'm sure that was on the short list of things that got cut, Brian. Season 2.
Number 11. Number 11.
All right, Brian, take us home.
Can I bring back Mission to Mars, or is that still a no-go? No, easy. Indiana Jones. Like Rise of the Resistance may have finally edged it out, but I have ridden that attraction conservatively. I went to the park once, and every park hopper I did, or not park hopper, every Easy Pass I did, the entire day was Indiana Jones. I know everything that's coming, and I am still always surprised. I always find something I hadn't seen before, always. So that really was, no offense, that really was number 11.
Well, hopefully we will get episodes 11 and beyond. All right. Thanks, everyone, so much for joining us today for the Behind the Attraction Junket. Thanks to our fantastic panel. And as a reminder, the show premieres July 21st on Disney+.